What's up, everybody, and welcome to Growing Up Gaming, your weekly podcast where we meet a new person of the internet to discuss their childhood with gaming and how it inspired their lives today. My name is Mitch Power. Again, thank you guys so much for returning each and every week to the show. Hope you're subscribing there on iTunes or Google Play or Spotify or YouTube. So if you're checking out the show, any of those methods or any other way I didn't mention, I really do appreciate it. This week on the show, we have our guest. His name is Gary Gray. Met this man with the help of, I believe, the Nintendo Guru. Hooked us up and everything on Twitter. So we had an awesome chat and everything. I especially like talking to guests who live overseas or in a different country because I get a completely different perspective of things that I didn't even think about. So you get to hear some of his stories and, you know, maybe realize that it was definitely different over there compared to where you grew up. Or maybe it wasn't. Who knows? But either way, he was nice enough to come on the show and share his stories. If you want to be on the show just like he was, go ahead and send me a tweet at MitchPower1116 on Twitter or at the podcast Twitter page, which is at GUG Podcast on Twitter. Without further ado, let's get things started with Gary Gray. Do you remember what initially got you started playing games? Was it a family member? Was it a friend? Was it some magazine you saw? Like, what initially got your interest in gaming?
So, I've got a pretty bad memory. And I know that a lot of people say that I've been playing games since before I can remember. I literally have started playing games since before I can remember. As far as I'm aware, it was my mom who sort of introduced me to it, but I have got two elder brothers as well. They were definitely into gaming, but not really as much as I've been. But I remember sort of starting out with some like Space Invaders, like portable things. But when I say portable, we're on about like late 80s, early 90s portable. So these things were huge,
right?
When they literally were only Space Invaders, and that's all they played. No cartridges, nothing like that.
Right. It was like one single game, 2 buttons type of deal, and it was just like that's all it was.
I remember left and right wasn't even like a big button; it was like a giant metal slider, and it was kind of cool. I wish we still had that, you know, because it was such a cool little device, and I've never seen one again. But we had those sort of things, and we also had a Commodore 64, and we've had a bunch of weird things like Jaguars and stuff like that, and all sorts of things. A lot of Master Systems about obviously being in Europe. Us guys were Sega.
Right,
you guys,
exactly.
Everybody knows this. Like if you lived in Europe and you didn't have a Sega, there was something wrong.
Yeah, like, and that's what's weird too, because like I remember. That's like the best part about when I do this show with people who live, especially in different countries and stuff, because like I said, in Europe, things were different. And I mean, there were situations where, which is crazy to think about now, but there were situations where games came out here months before they did in Europe, or, you know, they would come out in Japan and then, you know, just like there would be gaps between releases. So also the internet wasn't there. So it's not like people were talking about all this stuff. You know what I mean? So, you know, Japan would have a game and then 6 months later it'd come to the US, or a year later. And then like a couple months later it would come to Europe, or vice versa. Sometimes it would go to Europe first, but it's just kind of weird with imagining that now would not fucking fly. Like the internet it would be on fire if some shit came out too early somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of strange because obviously I can remember the turnaround where things started getting released almost day and date, if not like, I mean, it's still like it with TV shows. The big ones like Game of Thrones and stuff are only like a day behind.
Right.
But we still get shows generally behind you guys if they're American made. But games, I can remember the turnaround. I can remember waiting for, like, you'd read in magazines, like our Nintendo magazines. I mean, I was always, like I say, a Mega Drive fan and Dreamcast and stuff. And especially Dreamcast, you would read stuff that had come out and in America, and it was ages before it came to us.
Right.
And I remember the turnaround quite well of when things started getting released day and date. And it was around the time that the internet sort of became readily available in everybody's house. And it always strikes me weird when we get a game way before the American markets as well. Like, I think probably the biggest one was Yoshi on the Wii U, because I think we had that about 4 or 5 months before it released in America.
I remember that. That was like the last one. Like there was like some Nintendo, it was some Wii U stuff. I think it was like either a Kirby game or a Yoshi game. I remember I was like, it got reviewed on IGN. Like, it was reviewed, and I'm like, this game isn't out for months. How are they reviewing it this early? I'm like, wow, Nintendo must have a lot of faith in them giving them a game so early. And then I'm like, wait, it's in Europe already? What the fuck's that about? Like,
yeah, it was crazy because I remember playing it and taking my time and finishing it 100% before the American markets got it. I was like, man, I could have done a YouTube walkthrough and been like,
right. All of a sudden, you have all these views and shit when it hits the American market. Yeah, I think I wonder if they kind of stopped doing that shit when the internet came out because they didn't want to piss anybody off that much. They were just like, ooh, we got to start releasing these things kind of same day.
Yeah, you get a lot of YouTube videos and stuff like revealing the final bosses on the day of release and stuff. And I mean, to wait 6 months for a game after that would be kind of annoying.
Yeah,
so
no one wants to do that.
It's the benefit of everyone that they come out day and date, especially the companies, really, because if there's a game that you're on the fence about, but you probably would buy it if it came out day and date. If you didn't, then you're not going to pick it up. You're just going to watch, everybody else's reviews, everybody else's walkthroughs, and just think, it's not for me.
I just thought about that. Yeah, you're right. Because, like, what if a game came out here and it was fucking... we were just talking about a game. What if Fallout 76 came out here first? And then everybody in Europe was like, not fucking touching that. And just the whole market / continent just was like, nope, and just dropped it. Like, wow, that would be really bad. But also, too, then, like... Again, information wasn't as readily available, so it's like, yeah, if you had like a magazine, you could see a review early and stuff, but it wasn't like as simple as pulling out your phone and looking at a YouTube video or a Twitch stream or a review on IGN or something like that to see a game, how bad or how good a game was, too. It was probably the exact opposite, though, too, when a game was so good and you were hearing all this praise about it and you're like,
yep,
I gotta wait 6 months. This is ridiculous.
And what makes it even more like, what made it even harder was when games came out and they were getting reviewed well and they looked good, and then they never came out in Europe. That made it even worse.
Jesus, hold on. What can you think of a game where that happened?
Yeah, there's actually quite a fair few. I think for me, growing up around the whole boom of Pokemon. You had the chat game with the Pikachu. Let's
Hey You
Talk
Pikachu
or something? Hey You Pikachu, that's the one.
Right.
And that never came out over here because they were saying that they struggled too much with the dialects. Like you go half an hour up the road in England and there's a completely different accent. And all the magazines were like raving about how good this game is and how if you
sucks.
And then it never came out.
That makes sense, but also, too, I mean, because I think about that, too, is like, that's still the case today. Like, I remember when Xbox One launched and Kinect was like voice commands and all this stuff, and they were just like, only in these countries. And
yeah,
I guess that's the same thing, because like, mostly, obviously, it has to do with just voice in general. Like, because obviously, the language, dialects, like, just... It's all over the place and everything. So, I mean, I can imagine that being a little harder to do. But, yeah, dang, dude. Hey You Pikachu just straight. It makes sense, though, but it's kind of shitty. Because, again, I was going to say, I wonder if Seaman was the same thing for Dreamcast. They were probably just like, no, we're not doing that.
I can't remember if that actually came out or not, but I mean, the Dreamcast was a good example of this whole other places getting it early, because we imported a Japanese Dreamcast probably about a month after release, and I think it was almost a year before it came out in England. So we had this Japanese Dreamcast with just Sonic Adventure. That was the only game that we had. We ended up burning it completely out. It frazzled itself, but.
You're just playing it so early. You were so excited. You just wore it out.
Yeah, and that was, I mean, obviously, times when you didn't get like 50 game releases in a week. You had one or two games a year from your parents, and you had to either like them or just play them anyway.
Yeah, exactly. You either enjoyed them or you didn't, but there wasn't an option.
And I mean, that's a strange thing to do now, isn't it? You can't import a console a year in advance anymore because they're released in that time.
Yeah, for the most part now, I mean, things are released day and date. I know the only thing I've heard of lately is people importing... The only thing I heard of people importing were PlayStation Vitas from Japan, just because Vitas were so popular there, and they had color variants, and they had all these they had like the newer model that had micro USB before the other ones did. Like they had just like all these newer models of them and everything. And in America, we were just getting that basic ass black one, and there was no fancy one. So I remember like that's really the last thing I remember hearing people like importing. Otherwise, I've seen some import stuff on Amiibo just because they don't release some of the Japan ones. They only release there. Like I remember, I think Monster Hunter had some.
Yeah.
And they just didn't happen here.
Yeah, there's Monster Hunter and Box Boy, and it's a strange thing that they still do that with some things, which, especially Amiibo, something that's like highly collectible, but thank God it's not with consoles anymore.
Right, exactly. Well, sometimes, I mean, the only thing that sucks is like they do the limited editions, but also that makes sense based off the market, right? Like certain limited edition consoles come out themed around a game that people in America probably don't give a fuck about, so why would they bring it over here? So that type of stuff makes sense. But vice versa too. I mean, there's stuff that I'm sure comes out here that maybe someone in a different country is like, oh, that's not coming out over here. And I think that might be the only thing. But games, no. Like, they're not going to do that with games anymore. So, I mean, like, I think Persona 5 they did that with, because I remember Andrew Goldfarb was talking about how he imported the Japanese version of Persona 5 because he's such a Persona fan, and he played it and beat it, and then it came out in America and he did it again. Like, I was like, that's dedicated. He had like a person translating it for him as he's playing it at the office. I'm like, Jesus, dude, you really like Persona 5 quite a bit and everything. As far as it goes, so with your parents and stuff though, like your mom and everything got it. Were your brothers, do you think your brothers were the catalyst for her to get it? Or was it kind of around like when you were coming of age, she was like, oh, I think this is when we should get it to have them all play together?
I think some of the early machines we had, like I was on about the handheld ones and stuff, I think she'd have had those before we were born.
Right.
Just judging by, like, I mean, they looked vintage when I was 3, so
right.
so they've got to be, they had to be fairly old. But I mean, I think my brothers were the influence for the Master Systems and the Mega Drives and stuff like that later. Definitely around the PlayStation 1 era. Like they brought the PlayStation 1 for my eldest brother at the time for one of his birthdays, and that was sort of that was a revolution for everybody, really. You know, seeing like a console with discs in 3D was a massive leap. Whereas I was playing a Master System on a black and white TV for as long as I could remember.
Right.
Like my parents brought me this, like, I mean, colour TVs existed, don't get me wrong.
Sure, no.
Like, I'm not that old.
It's not like they were so far behind, like you lived in the middle of nowhere and they're like, we got one color TV in the country. No, like, it makes sense. Also, too, I mean, you're a kid. They're not going to buy you the highest end shit. You're a kid.
Yeah, so they brought me this, like, a weird, like, it was like a white plastic TV with the biggest antenna you've ever seen in your life, and it was only black and white. And it had, like, these big 2, like, huge wheels on the side. One was volume and one was tuning. And I had a Master System running through that for ages. But I mean, one of the weird things that I always remember is especially when the N64 came out, was the difference between the 50 and 60 hertz, because some of the games you had options, especially on the Dreamcast, you had to choose 50 or 60 hertz. And as a kid, I remember not knowing anything about this at all. But for anybody who doesn't know, we got lumbered with 50 hertz in the UK because of the way that our TV systems work and stuff like that, and our power outlets. And basically what it meant was all our games was like super slow.
Right.
So I think this is where our love for Sonic comes from, because stateside you're probably seeing Sonic as, you know, this pretty fast character who goes through the levels, they don't last very long. In England it was very slow. Like, it was miles slower than Mario was. The music was slow. And you don't realise until you play the releases later on. Like, I think the first time I realised how slow our version was when the Wii started doing the virtual console stuff. I brought Sonic 1 on that, and I was like, wow, what's going on with this game? Oh no, it'd have been the Mega Collection on the GameCube, actually.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, wow, why is this game running so fast? Like, has somebody done something to it?
No, he just realized, like, that's how everybody else has been doing it.
Yeah, that's how everybody else has been doing it for years, yeah. But, I mean, growing up, we had a plethora of different machines, really. Like I said, the Commodore 64 was the main first one we had. but we had PlayStations. Like I said, we had N64. We had Xbox when Xbox first came out, and 360. We had Jaguars. We had Neo Geo Pockets as well.
Jesus.
My brother
be the only person on my show that's ever had a Neo Geo Pocket.
Yeah, I even got an N-Gage at one point, the Nokia N-Gage with Pandemonium, Tomb Raider, and a copy of Sonic in that as well. And I think it's because my brother likes to buy systems, buy 2 games for him, and then he's done.
That's crazy. So, what, like, when you were growing up, was he as, obviously you were more into gaming than, like you had said earlier, like you were more into gaming than they were and everything. Were they, like, into gaming to the point, like you said, so they got a console, they were excited about the console, they'd get a couple games and be like, that's cool, and then just stop? Like, just didn't really seem to care much about it after?
Yeah, I think they fall victim to hype a little bit. I think they always wanted the newest thing, freshest thing on the market, and then after the launch games, I mean, launch games are always a tricky one anyway, because I never feel like a console's had a truly amazing launch. For any system, really.
Yeah, well, I mean, also, too, most developers aren't tapping into the full potential of the console. They're just figuring the shit out. You know what I mean? They're like, here's the first thing we can crank out on it. But, like, look at PS1, like, look at PS2. Like, PS2 games when they first launched compared to PS2 games when the cycle ended, like, they were way better and way more advanced. And that's just because they were figuring out better ways to get more out of the console. Grand Theft Auto 3 and Grand Theft Auto San Andreas came out on the same console. That's, you know what I mean? Like, and how much more advanced was San Andreas compared to 3? Like, 3 was them figuring it out, and then they're like, okay, we can work more out of it. Here's Vice City. Oh, we can work even more out of it. Here's San Andreas. Like, most launch games, I mean, it's hard to tell what consoles I would say would have the best launch, but Nintendo consoles tended to. Like, I think I would say, because, like, Mario World is still, for Super Nintendo, is still fucking crazy good. Like, it's still such a good game. Granted, it didn't, like, tap into the true potential of the console, but it's still just gameplay-wise, it's incredible. Like, look at Breath of the Wild. That's also one that's like, holy shit.
Yeah, Breath of the Wild's a crazy one as well, because technically a Wii U game, so does that mean that the Switch will be able to do something even more than Breath of the Wild at the end? Or is the infrastructure just that close to the Wii U that they were able to do it well? I mean, I think probably the worst one for launch, which probably get hate for, but is the Xbox 360. Like, I felt that its launch was... I got the console near to launch. I didn't get it on launch date, but I remember getting home and playing a couple of the games. I was like, I wish I'd have just not bothered for a couple of years. Yeah.
I worked at a video game store when the system came out, and I remember, like, that particular console had games, and that was the first into, like, HD, so that's when, like, games looked insane comparably. But, like, the games themselves, I remember Condemned was a launch 360 game, and it was like a horror game, like horror first-person game. And that was, like, the one that we pushed a lot, because it was, like, this one looked good, but also was a good game. Like, it wasn't shitty. But then it wasn't until, like, 6 months or a year later when it was, like, Oblivion came out. And then the biggest one, honestly, that I remember was Fight Night Round 3. Because Fight Night Round 3... it was a boxing game, and like some people don't give a shit about boxing. But when they saw visually how insane that game looked compared to like the old boxing games, like I remember people coming to the demo station where we had Fight Night and literally playing it and just fucking stopping what they were doing and buying a 360. Like, they didn't give a fuck about, they were just like, I want Fight Night and a 360 right now. That was, and again, those people didn't give a shit about boxing. They just saw graphically how much more advanced the system was over the competition, which again, like 360 came out a year before PS3 did. So like seeing that first, people just freaked the fuck out. And then eventually they would find other games. Gears of War was also, I think it was like a year and a half after. That was the big AAA, like really pushing shit out there. Of course, Halo, but yeah, I remember like 360's launch, like those launch games like Perfect Dark Zero and Cameo were like, ugh.
Yeah, Perfect Dark Zero, and I think Sonic 06, I brought that as well, which was probably one of the worst things you could have. one of the worst things I could have brought. And like, I was such a huge fan of Perfect Dark on N64 that when I brought Zero, I was like,
Yeah.
I don't know what would.
Yeah, it was, again,
doing, yeah.
They were trying, but, like I said,
Yeah.
it was like a year and a half later is when big shit really started happening, and then that's when they were like, all right, now we got something here.
Yeah, so, I got Gears of War just after then, and I remember being impressed by that. It's good that you brought that up, actually, because I forgot about that. And that was the first time I think I looked at that system and was like, no, you know what? I think this is the future.
Yeah, this is, I think, like, that was the game, because I remember them showing trailers of that game, and people were losing it. And then when it came out and people saw how good it looked, and again, comparably, now you look at, like, the first Gears, not the remaster, the first Gears, and you're like, ooh, this is... It's rough, but again, that was them figuring out the 360. And then, like, look at Gears 1 to Gears 3, and Gears 3 looks so much better on 360 and was, like, way bigger and way more advanced. So, again, they figure things out, so it happened.
And that's the crazy thing about growing up with games as well, is, like, how many of us looked at the early shooters, especially GoldenEye, it was like, you're never going to get more real than this.
Right. Oh, yeah. That whole PlayStation 1 and 64 era is the hardest because back then that was fucking perfection to us. And now you look at it and it's muddy and gross and doesn't look right at all. Like the flat texture faces and shit. Like it's just so bad.
We all remember being blown away by Final Fantasy VII. It was like, that's it. This is it. This is realism. This is the greatest game that will ever exist ever.
Yep.
Nobody else will put this cinematic quality into this game. And you look back at it now and you're like, why are these guys walking around in cardboard boxes? Right. What's wrong with that guy's hands?
Yeah. And like Cloud's hair is just all sorts of just like blocky and stuff. You're like, we thought this was like the realest thing ever. 'Cause again, like, and it's funny 'cause like Square Enix specifically, their cutscenes, whatever generation the console is, it doesn't matter. Their cutscenes are like, holy shit, these look ridiculous. And really, for me, it wasn't until Kingdom Hearts 3, because like, I'm a huge Kingdom Hearts fan. Kingdom Hearts 3 is fucking beautiful. It is crazy good looking. The Toy Story level looks better than the Toy Story movies, and that's fucking crazy. And then like, the cutscenes look like really nice. But then when they like turn the camera and like that's also gameplay, like it looks that good. I'm like, finally, I think Square's getting to the point where their cutscenes can't look much better than the actual gameplay itself. And like, it's only going to get more crazy with whatever next consoles end up happening. But yeah, now they've gotten to that point because before Square's cutscenes used to look way more advanced than the actual gameplay did. But now they're kind of getting to that even point. But one thing I was going to ask, because again, especially growing up in England and stuff, why did you were talking about how like Sega Master System and how like Mega Drive and all that were so popular? Why wasn't Nintendo popular?
Honestly, it's still kind of the same now. You don't really see them about as much. Like if you walk into a game store, you got the left hand side is all blue, all PlayStation. The right hand side is all green, all Xbox. And then Nintendo's like one little tiny counter in the middle with a bit of red
crazy.
on. And then the rest of the store is like clothing and stuff like that.
Right. Because that's what video game stores have turned into now.
And the thing is, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's Nintendo not paying for the shelf space. I don't know whether it's just the fact that it doesn't sell as well over here. I don't know. I can't tell you what it is. But it's just always never been pushed as much. Now, don't get me wrong, you watch a kids channel and you will see the same Mario Bros 2 for the DS advert, which has been airing for the last 6 years on constantly. But if you go into an actual game store, it's not there, it's not in your face like the other guys are. And it's so strange, and I think that's part of the reason. I think the other thing is as well, especially in the 90s, like, I mean, we obviously got American TV over a bit later on, but the restrictions on American TV and how loose English TV was at the time, I think that people just liked the violence and stuff, which Nintendo was obviously cutting out their games. And like over here, Mortal Kombat was huge on the Genesis, and you got all the blood splatters and all the decapitations and all that sort of stuff. And I think that kind of hurt them in this market, because if you look at some of the cult TV, especially like programs like Bottom in the 90s, they're violence driven.
Right.
that was a trend in the 90s, and I just don't think the Nintendo really followed the trend of Europe very well.
Yeah, I mean, that the later part, that makes a lot of sense. Because, yeah, you're right. Nintendo was very much like, especially Mortal Kombat, dude. Like, if you played Mortal Kombat on Super Nintendo, that was fucking lame. Like, no one wanted to do that. Like, on Genesis, it was, or Genesis here, fully, like, blood, all of everything. Like, you saw everything. So, that makes a lot of sense. It's odd now because, like you said, now, like, Nintendo, I won't say Nintendo isn't still like that. Obviously, they're still more a family-driven console and blah, blah, blah. But, like, they're fucking Nintendo. Like, that you'd imagine. But, again, it's just presence of mind and everything, too. I mean, look at Xbox in America, how it's. Obviously, PlayStation's winning this generation, sure. Xbox, though, isn't losing either. Like, they're selling more Xbox Ones than they did 360s. So, that's all they give a shit about. But in Japan, it's a fucking joke. Like, it's a joke. Like, they sell like 100 in the whole fucking country in a week. Like, that's it. So it's just like presence of mind and stuff. And Xbox has tried to make a presence there, and they tried to get like, I remember on 360 when they were doing like Blue Dragon and Lost Odyssey and Eternal Sonata, like they were trying to get RPGs and shit. And like people in Japan just don't give a shit. They're just like, we will never be an Xbox country, basically. Like, it doesn't matter. We're never going to give a shit about this console.
And the strange thing is obviously I see these reports and stuff of what's selling everywhere. I don't know anyone who owns a PlayStation. Like, all my friends are Xbox.
Right.
Everybody's Xbox. I'm the only guy with a Switch.
Right.
Everybody's Xbox. And it's so strange because you go to the gaming events as well, and like the Xbox queues are always huge. Like, especially the last time I went was when Sea of Thieves was there. And the Xbox One X was new, and that was the first place you could play it. It was in England, and the queues are insane.
Right.
And PlayStation's queues were only busy for VR. Everything else was empty. Was like you could walk there and queue for like 5-10 minutes.
Wow.
Everywhere else for Xbox was like an hour long. And it's just really strange when I hear these reports that, you know, you see them that Xbox isn't doing well. I don't think that's ever been the case. I think they've always done really well. It's just a media spin to say, look, PlayStation's killing it.
Yeah. No, I mean, like, it when you compare it, Apple, like, comparably, yes, PS4 is selling more than Xbox is. But again, like, Microsoft, and what's funny is, of course, when you are quote-unquote losing, you don't want to announce that you're losing. You don't want to announce how many console sales you have. So they stopped talking about console sales. Obviously, when Xbox 360 was destroying PS3, they were talking about all their console sales because they were number one, and they knew that, you know, now in the other way around, Sony wasn't talking all this shit during PS3 era because they were losing for the most part. But again, like, when you're winning, of course you want to talk about how awesome your things are, but also in their case, they're just like, the Xbox division made them like over $1 billion in profit. Like, they don't give a fuck. Like, they're like, cool, we're not number one. We made $1 billion. Like, it's not losing money. Until it starts losing them money, they're not going to be like, Xbox is a failure, because the thing's making them money still. And bottom line, that's what Microsoft gives a shit about. So.
And the weird thing is for me is, like, I'm predominantly Nintendo. I have been since really the late Wii era. Mm-hmm. Definitely from the Wii U onwards. It's not really so much that I'm just a Nintendo guy and that's all. I consider myself a video games fan in general.
Right.
Whenever I go to these events, I end up playing more Xbox and PlayStation because I don't own them. So it's nice to see what's on the other side. But it's kind of amazing to see the damage that Xbox One's launch did to them, because they came out with some awful policies and awful things, awful structures. And, you know, I've got so much respect for the way that Microsoft and Xbox are ran right now at this current moment in time. Like, Phil Spencer is, for me, he's one of the geniuses of the gaming generations throughout. Like, from the very start to now, like, he's managed to take the reins of like this like drowned in horse and pull it back out of the water.
Right.
Like, and he's done a fantastic job, and if anybody doesn't have respect for him, I would really be surprised.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I could go on about how awesome Xbox is and everything, but yeah, to take a company, and I mean, in a way, Sony, same way. Like, Sony has done the opposite. Like, they were just doing it from one console to another. Like, he did it from the same console generation. Like, this thing came out stumbling. He's turned it around, and now, like, they're doing shit that other people aren't, and it's crazy. Like, you know, and he's gotten to that point now where he, you know, he's head of Microsoft gaming, not just like Xbox. He's like, I don't care if you play on Windows. I don't care where the hell you play. He's turning around. Sony did the opposite because, like, PS3 stumbled out of the gate, and eventually what's odd to think about this, PS3 actually outsold 360 lifetime sales overall. It just took until, like, that last year for them to actually pull ahead. But then, like, for them to, like, turn shit around from PS3 to PS4, and PS4 being way more user-friendly and way more of this, like, they did a great job of turning that shit around because people went from 360 all generation to now PlayStation this generation. But also, I guess it depends on where you live, too, because, like, here in the States, like, a lot of my friends, personally, like, all my best friends, we play on Xbox, and that's just how we've been. But I know a lot of people who switched to PS4, and they were on Xbox last generation. They were all about it. Now they're just like, nah, PS4 is better. Again, who knows what'll happen this next generation? If anybody, Nintendo going from fucking Wii U to Switch, that's way bigger jump than anything. Because, like, I was convinced if Switch sucked, Nintendo was done. I was convinced. And then for them to come out and make a console that's, like, really, 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 really good, like, ridiculously good, when the Wii U was not. Like, I remember getting the Wii U and I was just like, this is cool, but I played it for like a week or so and I'm like, all right, cool. Switch, literally, I'm like, and how many games they're pumping out and how they're putting, like, all their eggs into that instead of trying to do DS anymore, really. They're just like, nah, Switch. We're just going to do everything for Switch. Good for Nintendo, because, like, it's good to see a game company go from, like, not struggling, but just, like, getting their face kicked in the mud, and now they're just like, all right, we're coming back. That's always a good sign.
Yeah, it's great when a company plays their strengths as well. I mean, even throughout the entire Wii U thing, the 3DS was really the hero of that entire period in that story. And now they've gone, you know, all out with this handheld, like, hybrid thing. You know, Xbox has stuck to its guns with the online service as well. And it's just great seeing that, like, they're so different. You know, they're two completely different systems. I want them both equally as much. Like, I've got a Switch at the minute. I haven't got an Xbox. But it's just really cool to see them all playing their, you know, into their corners. But the next generation is going to be the thing that's going to be the most interesting of all, especially with Google coming out with, like, their, like, browser service, essentially.
Right.
And, like, the thing for me is, we know what it's like for our generation growing up with games and seeing, you know, 8-bit evolve into HD glory that it is now, and 4K and all that stuff. But I've got a 4-year-old who's currently a little bit more than obsessed with games. Every day she asks me to play Kirby or Mario, all that kind of stuff. And there's going to be something radically different when she's older that we didn't have. And I think that is the streaming services. Like, the internet is evolving to a point where it's so much better. And in a way, like, it's going to benefit everything. If everything's, you don't have to buy a box, you just buy a service, you know. But there's also like a love and a sort of a feeling that you get from, you know, which is even missing now. Going to a store, getting a manual out of the box and reading the manual while you're on the way home as your parents are driving, trying to get as much of the game in as you can before you actually put the cartridge or disc into the system.
Right.
And it's kind of interesting to think about that, really, the way we've grew up and the way our next generation and our kids are going to grow up is going to be completely different. You know, I mean, gaming was always considered a really geeky thing to do when I was a kid. Like, you were not cool if you played games. No one was cool. Now, you're not cool if you don't know the latest Fortnite dance.
Well, especially if you're a kid. Like, if you're a kid, it's fun. I went to a father-daughter dance with my daughter.
Oh, wow. This is a story waiting to happen.
And let's just say a lot of people were doing a lot of Fortnite dances, like a lot of them. And I'm just like, I wonder where you learned any of these things from. Yeah,
and it's crazy because, like, I take my daughter to the park and she wants to go on the swings, and then there'll be all these kids doing these Fortnite dances. They don't care about the guns and the shooting.
Oh, right.
And, like, They just care about the dancing. It's so strange.
Yeah, what's crazy now is like you said, back then we had the excitement of getting a disc, going to the store, getting it, reading it. Also, I'm sure you guys had like video rental services where you would like go to a store and like look at a box and like, you know, now it's all instant gratification. Like I got my son Fallout 76 for his birthday. I didn't buy a disc. I didn't buy a game. I bought it digitally, and I basically was like, what do I do? Like, what kind of gift do I just give him where I could like give him an actual gift? And basically I printed up the picture of like, you own Fallout 76. I just printed that up when I bought it from the Microsoft store off of the computer. I just printed that up and I was just like, here's a card. And I gave him the card and he opened it up and it had that in there. I'm like, it's already installing. It's ready to go for you. And he's like, that's cool. But there's no like physical item. Now the only thing is consoles. But yeah, with the kids, especially when it comes to a streaming service, now it's going to just be like, you don't even need to wait to fucking download the game. You're just going to be like, all right, I'm going to play it, click, and just start playing it. Like, that's how it's going to be going forward, which is crazy to think about. But one question I was going to ask, so when you were growing up, like, did you have friends in school that played games as well or anything like that? Or was it like you play games? Like, how was the culture because like when I was growing up, I wouldn't say it was like a geeky thing to play games and stuff like that. It was just like to me, it was more like a kid thing. Like adults weren't playing games as much. Like I just knew a ton of kids that were playing games, but it wasn't really considered like a geeky thing or like like you were an outcast if you played games. It was more just like, a lot of people play games, but it was definitely in that day when I was growing up, I felt it was more like a kid thing. Like, you play video games, you're a kid. You're not an adult. Where now adults, everybody plays games, so
this is a really strange one because I suppose it all relates to what video games really mean to me. As a kid, all my friends were into Sonic. Like we all bought Sonic the comic, which is out in England every fortnight, every 2 weeks it was out. We all watched the cartoon. We all played the games. At break time at school, we'd be pretending to be Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, all that sort of stuff.
Right.
And then I moved, and the new school I went into, no one played games because they were all too cool.
Wow.
So for me, games evolved into a form of escapism. And the strange thing is that they've stayed at that point. They are still an escapism. Like I find I'm enjoying myself the most when stuff's going bad in real life, and I take time to really sink myself into a world and become immersed and become, something that's not happening in the real life. That's when I enjoy them the most. And since that moment when I moved, that has become the thing. That is video games to me in its entirety. So a bit later on, I did move again, and video games still weren't cool. And then Pokemon happened. Then all of a sudden, everyone's got a Game Boy. Everyone's trading, and Final Fantasy VII's there, and everybody's playing Final Fantasy VII all of a sudden. So it became an entirely different beast again. But the escapism thing always kind of stayed there with me, like after school, like when the whole gaming community was there and all my friends are playing the latest systems, and college happens and everyone moves away. I found myself back in a position where no one played games again. So I was at my happiest again, playing them on my own as an escape from. I still had friends, obviously, but they weren't interested. So we were sat down and I started talking about games, they'd all be asleep. So it became a thing just to escape from the real world for a little bit. And even right up to fairly recently, which is, we're going to get a little bit deep now.
That's fine.
Because 2 years ago, my eldest brother, came home from work one day and collapsed. And he got rushed to hospital where they found out that he had a brain tumour. And this brain tumour was a beast of a brain tumour, to say the least. It was literally the size of a cricket ball.
Wow.
So you got to imagine that pressing on the side of his skull against his brain. And it was terrifying. Like, it was the most sickening feeling, the most nervous I've ever been, the worst I've ever felt in my life. And I remember, like, going to the hospital because he was at one hospital, which is just down the road from me, until they found out exactly what was wrong. And then he got transferred for an emergency surgery the next day. And both times that I visited him in both hospitals, like the first one here was to just see him, you know, like an emergency run out to see how he was. And then we had to go home. And then when he got transferred before the surgery, we could go and visit him at the other hospital, about an hour and a half away. Both times I just remember thinking, I need a game. I need to take some sort of video game with me because this is going to kill me. Like, I need to be away somewhere else while this is all happening. And surely enough, sat in the hospital, like, we'd see him, see how he is, you know, all have the heart, like, moments together and stuff like that. And it was hard because he'd lost a part of himself. He didn't know who some of the people were, who he's, you know, like his sister-in-law. Wow. My sister-in-law. He'd ate a bowl full of food that he doesn't like. He becomes someone else temporarily. Wow. Before this tumor got took out. And I just remember coming out the room, crying my eyes out, booting up the system, lost in Breath of the Wild. And that became the sort of the way I could cope with the pressure and everything that was going on, was to just get away for that little bit of time, whether it's an hour or two, or while he was having the surgery, he was in there for like probably 7 hours, which was the worst 7 hours you could ever face. And I think that if it wasn't for me taking games to escape, I would have probably done myself some damage with overthinking and nervousness and all that sort of stuff. So it's kind of weird how the situations that you got put in life growing up with the video games has some sort of effects. And I'm sure it's the same for everyone who's watched films or who's into comics and stuff like that. But that became such a thing. And that's the weird thing about right now. Like, life is good. Well, I've got my family there. He's okay after the tumor. I've got my daughter, and I find myself not enjoying games as much as I have done in the past. Like, I still enjoy them, but I can't totally escape into this world because I get distracted by all the good things around me.
Right.
And it's just such a weird feeling to know that is the thing that really gets me deep into these worlds and characters and stuff like that.
No, I mean, and I think people out there, the good thing is at least you found something that was not destructive to you to help cope with things. Because, I mean, there's plenty of people out there who go to other things that are definitely not productive or not good for you for ways to cope. But, I mean, you know, everybody copes in their own way. Some people escape into music. Like, they'll just close their eyes and just put on headphones and just listen to music. You know, I can definitely understand when, you know, you go through a tough time, just trying to immerse yourself into something, because if you stand around and just think about it, you're going to go nuts. Like, you're going to go crazy. You know, if I had something rough going on, I would just try to work and just put all my efforts into work. Like, if I was having some major stuff going on, I would just go to work and just be like, all right, I just need to focus on work. Don't focus on all the other bad shit that's happening. Just focus on work. I mean, having your Switch there was obviously awesome, because that was something that was nice for you to be able to have there and still be there at the hospital, but having something to keep your mind distracted and stuff like that. Because similar thing happened when it's also gaming will pass the time so quickly. Because imagine 7 hours. Okay, just sitting there for 7 hours, nothing to do. You're gonna lose your shit, especially when something tragic is happening. You know, it obviously, like, for example, for me today, nothing tragic happened for me today, but I played Apex from 7 a.m. and all of a sudden I looked at the clock and it was 2 p.m. and I was like, holy shit. Like, first off, I felt bad. I was like, I haven't done anything today. Like, I've been sitting here just playing a video game. But that shows how quickly, like, something like that can distract you and keep you occupied, but also especially in a rough time. You know, you always want to, at least you didn't, you know, it's not like you went to, like, go drink at a bar or start doing drugs. Yeah. Like, you could have easily turned to something more destructive. But yeah, I mean, at least gaming's there to help ease your mind and help distract you, at least during those downtimes.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not as if it's like it's not the only form of escapism, but
Sure.
it is a big part. It's not like when my first girlfriend split up with me and I was there like crying on my Game Boy Advance, like, oh my god,
Right.
the world, what's going on? At least I've got Advance Wars.
Yeah,
It's nothing like that,
Right.
But like, it's just it's a strange thing where it seems to always be there at the right times, and like I'm incredibly thankful for that. And also, I mean, I've got an addictive personality, but I don't get addicted to the bad things necessarily. Like it's always something like the same as you. Work can be one of them. I remember working till like 3 a.m. In a food store once just to get away for a little bit. But there's, video games can be whatever you really want them to be. It is just a form of entertainment at the end of the day, regardless of all the arguments that people have over which console's better and what was the right thing to do growing up and what the future's going to be. None of that is really relevant, because the thing is, we're all just game fans, right? It is a way of consuming media and enjoying yourself, and whether that be at the worst times in your life or the best times in your life, or just because you don't like TV, that's fine. It's perfectly fine. And it's just so weird when people have these flat out arguments and fallouts just because somebody doesn't agree that the Xbox is better than the PlayStation or something like that,
People
And
just
I've
don't
kind
like
of-
to admit when they're wrong or that they've made a mistake. I think that's what it boils down to. As a guy who's gone to therapy for a little bit of time now, admitting when someone's wrong is a very hard thing to do. So people want to argue and justify and not feel like they made a bad decision. So it's just stupid when people argue over dumb things like that. There's so many other things you can argue over. Like, why are people starving in this country I'm in? Or why is there so much violence in the streets? No, we're going to argue over, fuck your Xbox, my PlayStation's better. Like, yeah, that's what we're going to argue over.
And don't get me wrong, you have to choose your corner. And it is good to have a little bit of banter.
Right.
But like, to have complete fallouts over it is just insane to me. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, people, again, I think it's just people want to justify that the thing they did was the right decision, and, God forbid somebody wants to say, oh, I made a bad decision. Like, they don't admit they made a bad decision. They wouldn't think everything they do is awesome and right. So it happens. So question, was there ever a point in time, it sounds like there wasn't, but was there ever a point in time when gaming just like, you stopped gaming in general? Like, did you ever get to a point where like gaming wasn't a part of your life for an extended period of time or anything?
There was a couple of years, mainly, I think it was around Xbox 360 and Wii sort of era. We spoke a little bit before we started the show about I got an Xbox 360 and I wasn't impressed with the initial launch. I got a Wii and was like, man, this is the most dumb thing ever on the planet. Zelda was good, Mario Galaxy was good, but then what is all this other stuff that's coming out?
You mean
And
you
I
didn't like
stopped-
Wii Music and Wii Fit, bro? Those were staples of that console.
Look, I got man boobies, and I played real guitar, so no.
Right.
Yeah, there was just a time where I was like, I'm kind of done, and then I ended up picking up back towards the end of the system's lives and back buying everything that I missed. And I was like, wow, this was never bad. Was it just a phase, a frame of mind, or what was it? I can't really tell you what it was, but I just stopped. And I think it might have been the same thing again. Like, I'd got a decent enough job for somebody my age. I was living in my own place. I left home quite early, and things were going good. So I think that I just dropped off.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I was in the same boat where I didn't drop off. Like, I just got into skateboarding and stopped for 4 years. Like, I didn't give a shit about anything video game related. And then I got a job at a video game store, and that immediately sparked every interest back up. But I was right there with you, though, where the whole PS2, Xbox, GameCube era, I just was zoned out. Like, I didn't follow news. I didn't give a shit what games were coming out. I just wanted to skateboard. But when I started working at the game store, it wasn't towards the end of the life cycle, but it was like 3 or 4 years into the life cycle. And I remember, to be honest though, that's not a bad thing, dude, to come into a console like years after it's out, because like you said, you don't have those droughts of terrible games. You don't have those droughts of no games. You just come in when everything's awesome and cheap, and you can just go and buy a bunch of shit and just start playing it. And that's what, as soon as that happened, I haven't fallen out of games again. Like, they've just continued to pique my interest and essentially become my number one hobby. Also, when you get older and fatter, it's harder to skateboard. So there's also that too. But no, like, video games, like, there was like a point in time I just didn't care. I was just like, I don't care about any of those things right now.
Yeah,
also,
I think for me as well.
The picture, so.
I was going to say that's a big part of it. It was probably, that, and I was into music. Like I said, I play guitar quite a bit, and I was in bands and stuff. I was going to be famous, but I decided to not bother and just be a normal guy who struggles to pay his bills. But yeah, other things just happen, and it's funny you say that about the consoles being the best towards the end of the life, because I didn't buy an Xbox One, even though I was really excited for the reveal, the launch, everything. Because I was like, I got burnt out on the Xbox 360 when I bought that. I thought it was terrible at launch. I thought the games were bad. And I was like, yeah, I will get an Xbox One. And surely enough, how many years later is it now and I still don't have one?
Right.
Like, I've had my fair share of playing Xbox One because I play at events. My brothers have got one. My friends have got them. And I just never got around to buying one. And I'm still looking at them thinking, every time I go to a game store, I look at the Xboxes and I think, is it the right time now? I mean, there's only like 7,000 good games on it now.
Right.
No, I'll wait a bit longer.
Don't worry. One time a sale will happen, and it will just be the perfect storm, and that's when it happens. Like, everything has to line up right for that, unless it's just like dude, when the Xbox One X came out, I was like, that is mine day one. I'm not waiting for shit. I cannot wait for it. But like, yeah, no, it makes sense because I mean, I know people that wait for that perfect storm of like, well, there's this bundle with this free game, with this gift card, with this, and I can trade in this and this and this promotion, and then just all the stars align and you end up getting it. So that's what happened. My buddy Brandon, who was on the last episode 100, he had an original Xbox, and like everyone else had an X. Yeah. And we're all like, quit fucking up and go buy an X. Like, you're fucking up in life if you're not doing this. And we were just peer pressuring him all the time. And then finally, like, a GameStop promotion happened where, like, if you trade in this, you got an extra $100, and then you got Red Dead 2 for free, and it came with this. Like, and I remember, like, just blowing him up with that. I'm like, this is your moment. This is it. Go do this. Like, don't fuck this up. This is the best deal. Just go do it. And he ended up doing it. So that'll happen one day. Like, some crazy sale will happen. You'll walk into a store and go, all right, it's time. And then you could buy Game Pass and not need to buy anything else, and you'll be fucking fine.
and that's the amazing thing about Xbox is like we're saying about how they brought the entire like direction that the system was heading and turn it around. That is the greatest thing that's ever happened, in my opinion. Like, Game Pass is just a phenomenal idea. Like, why hasn't it been done sooner? Is beyond me. Like,
and they do it so buy a system, and they have the system in place to have it work well. Yeah. Like, it's just really good. It's really, like, every time, my favorite thread ever is on the Xbox One subreddit or the Facebook group for Podcasts Unlocked. It's like, I just bought an Xbox. What's the first game I buy? And no one says a game. They just tell them, go buy Game Pass. Like, fucking stop. Just go buy Game Pass. Just everybody just lights it up. Game Pass. Because you can just go get that and do everything. So,
yeah, I mean,
the streaming services later will get to that point eventually as well. I'm sure everybody will have their own thing, except for Nintendo will do it 25 years from now.
Yeah, and they'll have some weird limitation, like, you could
right.
do it.
You can download 3 games a month for 3 hours each game. Like, what the fuck are we doing, right? What?
And I mean, the Game Pass thing is the modern day equivalent to Blockbuster. Go in and get in a couple of games for a couple of, some pocket money and renting them and see if you like them before you're going to carry on. Except this time you actually kind of own them. I mean, obviously that's the downside that people say is you're not going to get the physical media, you're not going to have it forever. But at the end of the day, I mean, we've all got backlogs that are that big. What's missing a couple of those games in the future going to do to you? Right. It's going to do absolutely nothing, because the next console will be backwards compatible, or if not, people emulate stuff anyway, so you're always going to get your hands on whatever it is you want.
Exactly. So that's never a problem. As far as it goes with, like, as you were growing up, you kind of had, though, majority of the consoles that you wanted to play, though. So it wasn't like a situation where you didn't have much of what you kind of were interested in. Because, like, I remember when I was younger, everybody had a Sega Genesis, and then there was that one kid who had a Super Nintendo. So I would go over his house and stay the night and play the shit out of a Super Nintendo. Same thing. PlayStation. Everybody in my neighborhood was PlayStation. I got a PlayStation, and then that one buddy's like, hey, I got a 64. I'm like, all right, I'm going to your house tonight. Like, we're going to play some games. But with you, that kind of, you didn't really have that just because you kind of had most of the stuff. Or was there a situation where you had to, like, where you had friends and you were like, yeah, I'm going to go? Well, also, too, you were saying you moved to that new school where everybody was too cool to play video games, which is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard.
Yeah. So there was actually a situation with that, which was the Mega Drive's add-ons, which you guys, everyone knows what a horrible beast that was. But there was one guy who lived on the estate that we lived on, and he had the 32X, the Mega CD, everything like that. God. And the rest of us was like, why'd you need that? It's utter pointless. And it was utter pointless because he only had like 2 games for the Mega CD, which was, I think, Flashback and Sonic CD.
Sure. Sonic and then CD's legit, though. Sonic
yeah, it is legit, though. And then he had some awful Formula 1 game for the 32X, but at least it was in 3D.
Sure was.
So
for the most part.
And yeah, and I mean, the one thing we missed really was, well, I say one, the 2 things was the NES and the Super NES. We didn't have those. We had pretty much everything else except for those. And that's because my brother always thought the Game Boy was basically the same thing. And we had friends on the estate who had those, and we would trade consoles every once in a while. So we would lend them the Genesis, and we'd have the Super NES, and
right.
They had the Game Boy player for that as well.
That's awesome. I forgot. Yeah, I remember that too.
We pretty much did get to play everything.
Right.
We obviously arcades were not big here at all, so we missed that. Yeah, like we didn't have. I don't know what it's like for the rest of England. Where I live, there was literally, you would only get a couple of arcade machines in a bowling alley. You would not get a full-on arcade. I think there was one, a Sega one in the local city, which is Birmingham. But my parents would not take us to an arcade.
Wow. Yeah, when I was growing up, like the arcade, there was a couple of arcades around, but like I remember when I used to visit my family over the summer, there was like a GameWorks, which was basically like a Dave & Buster, like a full-on like arcade place, and they sold food or whatever, but like they had the next level arcade shit. They had they had 2-story arcade games. They had games you would sit in like a fucking roller coaster. It would take you to the top of a building, and you would like shoot down shit as you're falling down the building like rappelling. It was fucking awesome. But like I didn't do them as much, but like I never had that. Like, because I talk to some people on the show who have that arcade experience of, like, Mortal Kombat in the arcades, which is, like, next level Mortal Kombat shit. Like, I just I played with my friends and stuff. There was people, like, straight up, like, pros at that shit. And same thing with Street Fighter and, like, Marvel vs. Capcom and all those types of arcade games. Like, that's why I never fucked with an arcade stick. Like, to me, it's not natural. And to some people, they can't do a fighting game without it. Like, that's the only way they know how to play it.
The only time I ever had the arcade experience really was we had holidays to Spain quite a lot, and they used to have arcades everywhere. So I remember the Mortal Kombat in the arcade being a big thing. Like there'd be like not when I say a queue, I'm not talking like a huge queue, but there would be like a couple of people playing it and other people putting their money on the side of the arcade cabinet to go next.
Right,
and that's the only time I've ever seen that happen in real life. Like, I've seen it in films, I've seen it in TV shows. That's the only time I've ever seen that actually happen, was childhood holidays to Spain.
I don't think I've ever seen that in real life. I've seen it, like, in movies and stuff like that. People putting their quarters up there and waiting for their turn to play. I personally never saw that, just because, like I said, I also didn't go to arcades much. I think the only time I ever saw it, there was a place called Nickel World, which was like a lower end arcade site. So like they had a lot of very cheap games, but they were older arcade machines compared to the other ones. So it was almost like a secondhand arcade place where they had a bunch of machines. They actually had free machines there where like if you ran out of money, they had machines like old Mario machines and stuff that were free and you can just hang out and fuck around or whatever. But I remember DDR was there. And they got like one DDR machine and fucking people were just lining up for that. But otherwise, like, I never saw, like, those big fights. I really wish I had seen that, like a Mortal Kombat tournament or, like, a Street Fighter tournament or, like, fucking 50 people standing around losing it. Because you see it like esports now. Like you see like the Evo championships and like stadiums of like, you know, people just losing their fucking mind watching fighting games. And I never got that feeling, but it seems like it would be so cool to have like that type of local feel. You know, like, oh, this person's like the thing that ruined fighting games for me was the internet.
Yeah.
Because I would play a fighting game and thought I was good, and then I'd go online and get my fucking face stomped in for hours, and I realized I'm not good at these games. And it literally turned me off to ever wanting to play them again. I'm like, I'm good. I don't want to play these games anymore. I'm just bad at them. But then again, those people I'm playing against have been those people that have been in the arcades with fight sticks fucking their whole life playing those games. So
funny thing is, the same thing happened with me with shooters. I used to think I was the best at shooters. Like, I was definitely the best in my friend circles.
Right.
And then as soon as I played Call of Duty Online, I was like, wow. Yeah.
I'm not good.
I'll stick to one-player platformers.
Yeah, the shooter part of it, though, like, that was the only thing, like I said, like, there's certain games I'm really good at. For the most part, shooters, I'm not going to say I'm like the best or esports or anything, but I can hold my own, and that's all I give a shit about. I'm like when I play a game, when my best compliment ever, when Apex first came out, I was like, well, I played Titanfall 2. I was pretty good at Titanfall 2. Let me play this. And my buddy Brandon, who had played it before me, he literally goes, oh, you're not bad at Apex. I'm like, that's all I need to hear. I'm not bad at this game. I'm good. But other than that, like, the only games I can feel super confident in were like Rock Band and Guitar Hero. I fun fact, came in second place in the entire state at a Guitar Hero competition.
That's amazing.
Right. So that was that. And then, like, you know, the Trials games, Trials HD, those games, for some reason, I'm just super good at. And I can't explain why, but like every time I look at my friends list, at least, I'm fucking destroying everyone on my friends list. And I get so irritated when, like, if I do a course and I don't get gold first try, I get pissed. I'm like, fuck this. And I redo it over and over until I do. I'm just one of those like weirdos that just has to keep doing it. So everybody has their games that they're good at, but that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. So, and I can, like I said, now I know why you like Nintendo a whole lot, because the whole shooter online part of it.
Because I suck online
Don't have to worry about that shit.
I was really happy when Fortnite come to Switch, because I could play a game for 30 seconds and put it down and feel like I've known everything that I'm ever going to know about that game.
Right. Yeah, that's the other thing too, is like some of those games and everything are cool, but as long as you get a taste of it. But like certain games, like racing games, I like, actually, you know what the best thing is for me is sports games, because I don't ever see myself spending $60 on a sports game ever. Right. Yeah. Not saying they're bad, but I literally get my fix of them for like a couple hours, and then I'm done. Like, I'm like, cool. I played some games of this. I'm fine. And that's why when EA Access happened on Xbox, and it was like $30 for the year, and you get a 10-hour trial of every game, I was like, I just got all the sports games in the world. I'm so happy.
And you know, that's the worst thing for me, because I'm not a football fan, or soccer, I suppose, as you guys call it. I'm not a soccer fan in the slightest. Everyone plays FIFA.
I was going to say, in Europe, everyone fucking loves FIFA.
FIFA, and you go around the house like, oh, do you like games? Oh, yeah, sure. What do you want to play? FIFA. You're like, oh, motherfucker.
Like, fuck. Yeah, and what's funny is here is, if you were a gamer, even if you weren't a gamer, but you had a console, it was either Call of Duty or, here in the States, Madden, because it's American football. So it was like, you had those people that would own an Xbox and be like, what games do you have? Call of Duty, Madden, Call of Duty, Madden. Every year, that's the only things they fucking bought was Call of Duty and Madden. And like, there's still people out there like that. Now it's crazy. Think about this. You can buy, unfortunately, I will say PlayStation. You could buy a PS4, the console itself, play Fortnite, and never have to spend another dime on a video game again. There's no cost for Fortnite. There's no cost for PSN Plus, because you don't need it for Fortnite. So it's crazy now, because like you can literally buy the console and not buy anything else. Xbox, you still have to pay for gold. Whatever. Shut up, people. Who cares? Stop talking about that. But, but there's people out there. I remember I worked at Best Buy, and the bigger launches, like, I would see people come in for a midnight launch for Madden, and I would never see them buy anything else ever again. Yeah. They would come in and buy Madden and be like, that's all I need. But yeah, I can imagine their FIFA being that game for sure.
It's exactly the same. It's Call of Duty and FIFA.
Yep. I can imagine.
Exactly
that's what
the same. Yeah.
And then occasionally you get that one person that tries something new and doesn't like it. Like, I remember a guy came in and you could definitely tell gaming wasn't like a priority to him. But I remember he came in and bought Fallout, and he's just like, I've been hearing everybody else talk about this game. It's supposed to be good. And I remember him getting it and like a week later coming back and going, I don't fucking get it. I know, he's like, I just don't understand why people like this shit. I'm like, oh, okay. Just, you want Madden or you want Call of Duty instead? Like, I don't know.
The funny thing is, I was like that with, cause I went through a bit of, gaming on PCs. Like, I really like the, simulator games like, Roller Coaster Tycoon, The Sims, stuff like that. And World of Warcraft was one where everyone was playing. And World of Warcraft was the first time I realised that I really don't like MMOs that much.
Right.
Because my mate was like, oh, look what I've got. I've got this, I've got this, I've got this. All we've got to do is this. And I just remember standing there on it thinking, I don't have a clue what's going on. Right. I don't know anything. There's no real tutorials. There's nothing showing me what to do. You guys are souped up. I'm just a guy who's there like, I'm like the, the mother at the theme parks who's carrying all the bags for the rest of the family while they go and have fun on the rides. I was just there like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Well, I'm just here for no reason. I don't know what to do with my hands. Like, yeah, like I'm trying to think of games that are like that. Like, for me, it's just a time period. Anything that has to do with like medieval or like dragons and any of that, for whatever reason, I just don't like that time period. So like, example, people talk all about Skyrim and how they love Skyrim. And I remember playing it and just like, I fucking hate dragons and shit. Like, I just hate this like I just don't like this time period. But with like Fallout, I was like, I can fuck with Fallout or like sci-fi games. Like I was just talking to my buddy the other day. My favorite game on PS4 is Horizon because of the story. And it's just so unique and so different. And there's no other fucking game like that as far as the story goes. Like, there's always, there's, post-apocalyptic stories and there's zombie stories and there's medieval stories. But like, that one was like, when you say the term robot dinosaurs, you're like, what? Like, that's dinosaurs are old, robots are new. What do you mean? And then when you hear like the whole story about that game, like when you know the premise and you hear like, you're just like, holy shit, this is crazy. Way more into that than fucking dragons. And I ever will be.
And when we was talking earlier about people taking their corners and fighting over what they like, there is the big divide between the sort of medieval sort of adventures with swords and the shooting fans. Mm-hmm. And I feel like I'm smack bang in between them because I'd like to be good at the shooting games because I like playing them, but I'm awful. So when I play them online, that's it. I'm out in a couple of seconds.
Right.
But the fantasy games, a lot of them, I'd say the majority really are single player games.
Right.
So that's just Skyrim and stuff like that. But I find myself equally as bad at Skyrim as well.
Maybe it's the first person shit. I don't know. Maybe that's what's fucking you up.
Yeah. And somebody else said that to me. They was like, you can play third person. I'm like, I know. But I really can't play it third person. Like, I'm even worse because it's first person controls in third person. It's just bad.
Right.
And I did enjoy Skyrim. I really enjoyed it, but I'm really bad at it.
Dude, and not to mention, I love how my favorite quote is Bethesda when they were getting shit for putting Skyrim on everything. And their quote was, well, if you stop fucking buying it, we'll stop putting it on everything. Yep. And I was like, that's the most corporate answer I've ever heard, but that's the most truthful answer you can get. Like, stop buying it and we'll stop making it on everything. Sound good, people? Like, people love the shit out of that game. And like, I know people that have put thousands of hours into a single player Sky. I'm like, I don't get it, but all right, whatever floats your boat. I guess that's what you like. So, hey, if you like platformers and everything, go play Cuphead. That's coming to Switch.
Yeah, I play
awesome.
I played Cuphead co-op before it was released on the Xbox, an event. And it was really strange because they had this ID Xbox section, so there's like all the little indie games everywhere, right. And nobody was on Cuphead. And like I remember thinking this is a massive deal, and you guys aren't playing it,
right?
So we tried to get through as much as we could, which was very little.
Yeah,
but like that was the game that I almost bit the bullet for and got an Xbox One,
right?
That and Sea of Thieves, which obviously people's opinions on Sea of Thieves are slightly different to mine, but still.
See, the only thing I'll say about Sea of Thieves is like that game as a service overall is fantastic. Mm-hmm. When it came out, I was like, let's just say I was happy it was on Game Pass because if I had paid $60 for it, I probably would be pissed off because at first it wasn't like it was bad, but it just felt like, okay, here's as much as I can do, and that's it. But like them supporting that game and releasing all the updates that they have for that game without charging people for anything has been awesome. Unfortunately, games have kind of become that now. We're like Destiny 1. I fucking hated that game. I hated that game. I bought it day one. Everybody, I was like, Bungie, they made Halo. I love Halo. It's one of my favorite games ever. Bungie knows how to make a good shooter. Let's play that. And that first week of Destiny 1 was fucking trash. I just couldn't stand it. It was so boring. And then 2 years later, people were like, this game is so awesome. I'm like, yeah, 2 years later, this game is so awesome. Like, that game sucked at first. Unfortunately, games have somewhat become like that now. Like, they come out and they're like, okay. But then 2 years later, you buy a Game of the Year edition that has all these updates and everything, and it's fucking awesome. But
I mean, that's the crazy thing about the situation at the minute is that seems to be just a general thing that's going to happen, which is, like you say, a good thing about the Game Pass, because if it is like that, you haven't really sunk the money in. But if you invest in something that nobody else invests in, and then they decide not to do the updates because it hasn't made enough money,
right?
And you're alone on an island with a half-finished game,
right? That's the problem.
You know. Yeah, it's kind of a bit of a shame. I mean, luckily for me, like I said, I realised that I wasn't the greatest gamer, so I'm okay with the one-player games, and they tend not to do that so much on the one-player games.
Yeah,
they're not. Destiny was a fantastic sort of reference point for that, because I felt the same with Destiny. Like, I didn't like it much at first. My brother brought it. I was playing it at his house. I was like, it's okay. It's not great. And then I remember going about a year later, and like the game was different, so much different. And Destiny 2 to some points, not as extreme as the first one, I don't think, but that one changed quite a bit as well.
Right. Yeah, I mean, like I said, unfortunately that's been happening lately with games. But again, most single player games when they come out for the most part are good right away. So I mean, or they just get even better, like Witcher 3. The fucking game was insane. That was the other thing too, is like that time period during The Witcher 3 I was dealing with, but because the game was so big, that was actually a discouraging thing for me, just because I was like, I barely have time to play games. I want to play a variety of games. I want to feel like I'm doing something when I play a game. But I played 45 or 50 hours of Witcher 3, and I was like, this gameplay's great. These characters are great. The story's great. I haven't done shit in this game. Like, I've been playing for 45 hours. I've done nothing. I look at this map and I'm like, surely I've done something. And I look at this map and I'm like, there's all these X's that are still there, and I've been playing for so long. I'm just like, I can't do this. I gotta stop. I get it though. Good game. Not shitting on it. It's just too big for me. I can't do it. That's what scared me about Assassin's Creed Odyssey, because my buddy's like, unless you got 100 hours, don't start it. I'm like, what? Like, that sounds terrifying, but it's a good game. It's really fun.
And the funny thing is like, I'm the same. I try not to invest myself into RPGs, especially because of the time.
Right.
But then, man, Roller Coaster Tycoon 2 on the PC, I must have put about like 3,000 hours into that thing.
Right. It doesn't even have to be an RPG. It could be just any of those games.
Yeah.
So
something really dumb, and that's it. Like, Harvest Moon was another one.
Oh, dude, I know people that put in Animal Crossing.
Oh, I don't know how you can do that on Animal Crossing, because there's nothing to do except for catch fish.
Yeah, and
this is a Nintendo fan saying this. Yeah, right, this is a Nintendo fan saying this. I don't understand it. I get the idea, and I get this stuff to do in different days and stuff. But how you can put 1,000 hours in when there's 5 minutes of gameplay a day for a year?
Right. Like, you obviously have a lot of time on your hands, and you find some enjoyment. I know people that lose their shit over Animal Crossing, and I'm just like,
Yeah, I do that. Yeah, and in all fairness, they find enjoyment in the game, so it's good for them. Like, it's perfect. That's what they like. That's their power. That's their rock. Really, that's the thing that they need to do. If that's their thing, then it's worth getting a Switch for just for that. If you're a fan of it on the DS,
right,
when it comes out.
I think online made that game significantly better. Going to other people's places will make that game a lot better. The portability factor with the Switch and it, being like a local co-op, but then other things, that'll make it better. But yeah, otherwise, I'm good. If you're playing that game by yourself, no thanks. I'm good. I couldn't do it. One question I want to ask before we go: what is the worst game you've ever bought with your own money? Because you had mentioned before, when you get a bad game as a gift, it's like, that sucks. But I didn't have to pay for it, at least. What's the worst game? Like, you were like, yes, I can't wait for this game. I saved my money. I bought it. And then you played it, and it was just disappointing as hell. You mentioned Sonic 06, and that's a pretty good one.
It's a really weird thing to think about, because it's not something that I've actively thought about, to be honest.
Right.
There's been some pretty bad games that I've owned, for sure. I think for me, it was a game called Project Number 3. And the only reason that I'm going to say this is it probably wasn't as bad as stuff like Sonic 06, but it's because I thought it was something else that got released at the time.
Oh.
So I bought it. Imagine this. Imagine you're going to the store with this idea of Street Fighter in your head, and you're like, Street Fighter's amazing. I've seen everything about it. It's awesome. And you accidentally pick up Clay Fighters.
You're like,
that was what I did.
What are people liking this for? Yeah. This is awful.
And I was playing it. I was like, this is awful, man. How did all the magazines and stuff give this such a good review? And I can't remember what the game was that I thought it was. But I remember looking back in the magazines and thinking, shit, I've made a crucial error here.
That's a valid, that'll count, dude. Because, yeah, like I said, you were expecting one game and then just picked up. You're like, oh, yeah. Fucked up. Dude, I can't imagine what you just said, though. Somebody's like, Street Fighter is awesome, and you accidentally bought Clay Fighter. And you're like, the fuck? Who likes this? This is a bad game.
I mean, if you're going off presents, I think buying... someone brought me a full console version of Battleships once. That was pretty bad. Right. I would have rather have had Battleships the board game, for sure, because that's enjoyable, but one-player Battleships rendered in 3D... Not quite, no. No,
not really. If people wanted to check you out on the internet and see all the things you're doing nowadays, where would they go?
Our best place is Twitter, at FlatGapGary. It's kind of a variety Twitter. Like, I don't normally post as myself, which might sound weird, but there's cartoons on there. Sometimes I'm a Viking, all sorts of weird stuff.
I see that.
Because I get bored. I'm a little bit of a troll. And, I just like to poke fun, so that's probably the best place to start. I'm also on the Nintendo Dads podcast every single week. I say that. I'm in there in some capacity, whether it be a YouTube video or on the podcast every single week. And I've also got a website, which is the NintendoVillage.com. Which is, again, sort of a variety website. We don't specialize in anything. We have podcast hosting. We've got YouTubers signed up there. We've got article writers, game reviews. But we very, very rarely do any news. So just whatever we find enjoyable, which news isn't one of them.
Yeah, I mean, news is fine, but other outlets cover that. Let them cover that stuff, right? You cover all the fun stuff.
And to be fair, I could talk like this. When it comes alone in front of a camera, I just look at the camera and go, but there was a thing released today, I think, like, kind of. And I become this stumbling, thumbling idiot that can't talk. So, yeah, news is not for me.
No, that's fine. It's, like I said, let the big boys handle the news, and you just handle all the fun stuff. Nothing wrong with that. And if people do want to check out any of the cool things he does, I'll have links in the show notes for all of the above. So you can go there and see him stumble and bumble over the news maybe one day. It's a funny video. So, dude, thank you so much for being on the show, man. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
All right, and again, thank you, Gary, for being on the show. Guys, if you want to check him out on Twitter, go ahead and follow him at FlatCapGary. Of course, you can also check out the website that he helps contribute to, which is thenintendovillage.com. Of course, he is also part of the Nintendo Dads podcast. If you guys want to see any of those things that he is a part of, I will have links in the show notes for all of that. So, and again, thank you guys so much for your support. If you guys want to be on the show just like he was, send me a tweet at MitchPower1116 on Twitter, or at the podcast Twitter page, which is at GUG Podcast on Twitter. We also have a Facebook group. Search up Growing Up Gaming there, as well as the YouTube channel. Just search up GUG Podcast, or the website GUGpodcast.com. Guys, if you like the show, feel free to subscribe for new episodes every single Tuesday. Review the show on iTunes or Google Play. Let people know about the show. Share it with your buddies. Encourage everybody to come on. I really do enjoy hearing everybody's stories. So the more stories I hear, I always hear different games, crazy things that I didn't even know existed in the world. So please make sure you share the show with friends. And again, I appreciate all your guys' support each and every week. Thank you so much, and I will catch you guys next week with another new episode. See ya.